My name's Bob Balmer, Esquire, OBE. When the first committee was formed, each member of the committee looked upon different sections of the history of the town and said they would do research on that part. But nobody seemed to be interested in the maritime history or the shipbuilding. So I said I would take over that side. At that time, I didn't know the difference between my port and my starboard, and I'm not too sure still, the blunt end and the sharp end. But having read Wallace's history of Blyth, before I even came to Blyth, I knew there was a paragraph in there of Captain William Smith from the town who had discovered part of the Antarctic. There was only just this one paragraph, so I thought, well, we need to know more about this fella. He's in a way, he's like Northumberland's Captain Cook. The best thing to do is sort of tell you the story of Captain William Smith, who was a Blyth fella. His father lived at the Folly, which is roughly where Park Road meets Plessy Road. He served his apprenticeship with Marshall's, the rope makers, and also had a raft yard at Blyth, which was a timber yard. But Marshall's also were in the whaling trade, and every May they used to take on crews to go up to the Davis Straits and hunt whales and come back in about October. When the ice started to get, the weather would leave about August, September, as the ice started to creep back down the Davis Straits. They would come back with cargo ice. Now, that was the environment that Captain Smith served his apprenticeship in, and finished up being a mate on one of the Marshall's ships. And Captain William Smith became part owner of that vessel. Has 3 names listed, so they must have had a third each, because it doesn't give any differentials. And they started work as a transport ship for the government between the Thames, Woolwich, and the French coast, taking over troops and munitions and supplies to different ports on the French coast, wherever the stuff was needed at the time. Because at that time the Peninsular War was still going, as well as the French wars. That's pretty well documented in the Newcastle registers. But in the next Newcastle register is not listed in it at all. In the London register, that particular one was lost in a fire during the Second World War with the Blitzer of London, particularly the Thames, along the Thames side. And that's where Kingsbeam House is the headquarters of the Customs and Excise. And so in as I say, that register for 1814 hasn't survived. If it had, it would have shown who the 3 partners were, the 2 partners were at London, who made up the ownership of the vessel with Captain William Smith. I mean, it was logical business sense to make your captain have a third share in the vessel. So he would always be trying to get the best prices for the freight, buy it as cheap as he could, sell it as expensive as he could. So there was always going to be a cut of money for himself. And some of the captains made a lot of money out of that. Some of the captains, they were allocated a little bit cargo space, and they used to ply that themselves by raising money and moving stuff about. But getting back to Captain Smith, when the French wars came to an end in 1815, they decided that there was work to be had on the South American coast. The Spanish owned ports had been opened up to free trade, so the English could trade in them, which they couldn't before. I don't know exactly if the vessel had a cargo of mining stuff to be shipped to Valparaiso from London, but I know its later voyages it sailed regularly between Buenos Aires and Montevideo on the River Plate, at either sides of the River Plate, around Cape Horn and up to Valparaiso, the main port in Chile. They only used to do one. Sometimes they could manage two, but in the main it was only one voyage a year. By the length of time they sailed down, because you're about a third of the way down South America when you're at the River Plate, and you've got nearly as far to sail up the other side. And Cape Horn was always notorious for getting around at any time. And this is how, on one particular day, that when he went south for to go around Cape Horn, I was a strong southerly gale blowing, and he decided to sail further south. Now, not far south of Cape Horn, there was an imaginary line drawn around the globe, as you might say, and that was the lowest that had ever been charted. And he'd sailed off the charts, and he was in no man's land, and he started seeing pack ice and icebergs. So he put up lookouts, and then they found on February the 17th, I think it was, in 1819. Yes, 1818. The sighted land. They sailed towards it. They named the point Ridley Point, after Lord Ridley, Blyth. And then he just sailed away back, went under the gale and up to Valparaiso. And he reported to Captain Sheriff, the senior naval officer on the west coast of America, that he'd discovered seen this land. And he just pooh-poohed it and said, "No, you've just seen ice and icebergs. There's no land down there. Nobody's discovered land down there before."